Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another look at Chronicles of Elyria. Today we're going to check out part 9, which is going to cover crafting and professions. But before we do that, I wanted to just do a quick aside. This will be going up on a Saturday, Saturday the 20th to be exact. And some of you may be wondering where Skyrim has been. Don't worry, it's not going to disappear. I just haven't fully transferred all my mods to the new computer yet. I'm trying to transition everything over to it. It's completely built. I wanted to do a video on it for you guys, but it just didn't work out. But at some point, I will show you guys the specs and the different parts that I used, as well as some of the benchmarks I've been doing. I overclocked it a decent amount. So yeah, I've got about 30 gigs of mods in my Skyrim folder, and not all of them have transferred yet. So whenever that finishes, I'll get back into Skyrim. I'm also waiting to start the Total War Rome 2 series on the new computer as well. That should be able to start happening this week. So Skyrim probably a week from today. Rome 2 hopefully I can get out on Monday. We'll see. Anywho, let's take a look at professions. So professions in most MMOs, such as weaponsmith, alchemist, etc., are predefined from the beginning in keeping with our existing classless design. I am all over the place here. I missed a period there. Are predefined from the beginning. In keeping with our existing classless design principles, Chronicles of Elyria doesn't define specific professions. Instead, it encourages players to take skills from across different skill trees and combine them into unique ways in order to define their own professions. So you can pretty much do whatever you want, assuming there's some demand for it. I mean, I guess necessarily there doesn't have to be, but to make a profit, there probably should be some demand. So as an example, if you're a blacksmith with a specialty in making weapon blades that also has skills in carpentry and maybe in filigree, then you could rightly call yourself a swordsmith. This level of specialization allows you to reach the higher crafting tiers in areas you want while ignoring those that you don't. In this week's design journal, we're going to talk about how Chronicles of Elyria reduces the barrier to entering a new crafting profession and allows you to be a producer from the start. We'll also talk about the unique elements of crafting skills such as skill challenges, item specialization, component-based construction, and how we deal with non-renewable resources. And so we have a screenshot here. But yeah, so if you were looking for more detail on the crafting system in this game, this seems to be the design journal for you. I know this is of particular interest to me because I am very interested in some of the carpentry and smithing stuff in this game. Like I've mentioned before, I'd really like to be an armor and weaponsmith as well as maybe a shipbuilder. So let's see what this screenshot is. Okay, so this is just the, I think this is the same forge that we saw before maybe, but it definitely at night, well obviously, but it might be the same one, just different time, different angle certainly. But yeah, this is a typical village I imagine in the game. And so getting started with crafting. One of the problems you encounter in most MMOs is the inability to get started with crafting skill or profession. You want to be a blacksmith? Great, but that requires money to buy resources, tools, and crafting supplies. In most MMOs, this requires you to head out into the fields to kill a few bunnies, gain some coin, and then come back and sell off the vendor trash before you have enough money to do what you want to do. In Chronicles of Elyria, thanks to the powers of contracts, we've mitigated this problem by offering apprenticeships and loans. Most villages or towns will have a resident expert in a specific crafting skill. If you go to them, they may be willing to offer you an apprenticeship. This will result in them providing you tasks that will help you develop the skills you need to improve. And because they're getting free labor from you, they'll cover the supply costs for you. I would imagine not all players necessarily would. I think they're referring more to like NPC trainers. Like we've mentioned before, all NPCs will have their own routines and stuff. They're more or less living, breathing characters as far as the game's concerned. But they'll be hard-coded to be there to help players out, I imagine. Once you move from apprentice to journeyman. Many of them will even be willing to pay you for your service. Finally, can you guys see this okay, or do I need to scroll? I think I need to scroll. There we go. Finally, reaching the rank of expert in crafting or gathering profession will usually result in NPC loan agents being willing to grant you a loan to set up a small operation. So that's cool. Basically, when you hit the rank of expert, you can kind of figure that you'll find your own business somewhere. I'd like to kind of strike out on my own. I don't know if I want to wait that long, but like I mentioned before, I'd like to set out on my own and found a new village where I would be the blacksmith there. They'll take everything you own as collateral, of course, but it means you can start your small business with nothing but your wits and dedication. As well, PCs, player characters, may be willing to sign a loan contract even earlier than that if they trust your ability to pull off a profit. Or if you've got a friend in the game who's fairly wealthy, they might be willing to kickstart your career. But what really determines your crafting ability, character skill, player skill, both. Skill challenges. Game breaks skills down into two fundamental categories, combat skills and non-combat skills. Regardless of the larger category, all skills in Chronicles of Elyria require some degree of player skill. I do like that quite a bit. So that means that even if you are new to the game, you still have a fighting chance, assuming you're a decent player. If you are generally good with combat, it doesn't really matter if your level. Is there direct levels in this game? I forget. I think they've done away with levels, and you just level up skills. So somebody whose character is a novice in combat, but who is very good at combat, versus somebody whose character is fairly proficient in combat, but isn't necessarily so good at combat themselves, may be on more or less equal footing, which is nice, because barriers for entry can discourage a lot of people from playing games, and I think the more people that are willing to join this community and contribute, I think the better the game will do. I think that's the case for most MMOs. So, where were we? In the case of combat skills, it's fairly obvious how character skill and player skill intermix. Timing, reflexes, and intuition have long been staples in traditional fighting games, as well as aim-based combat systems. Add on to that damage and reflex modifiers, and you've got a hybrid combat system. I think the combat is going to be very similar to Mount and Blade, but they haven't released anything on combat yet, so we will see. I think they were saying that they're going to try to release another design journal sometime this week, maybe around the middle of the week, I'm not entirely sure. But if you're following along on their webpage, I'm sure you'll see it sometime this week. I don't know if it's going to be on combat, but I think that was the general consensus. At least that's what most people are thinking. So with non-combat skills, it's a little bit more complicated. With Chronicles of Elyria, we wanted a system that went beyond simple progress bars and instead engaged the player in the activity they were performing. So smithing isn't just like clicking in a menu to build a sword and then waiting for the sword to build. You're actually going to be engaged in it. You're going to be hammering, not weapons, you're going to be hammering metal, actually smithing stuff rather than just clicking buttons in menus, which I really like, especially if in a game like this where you are more inclined to have a profession outside of combat. It's definitely nice that they're putting in the effort to make you more engaged in that, because obviously you would tire pretty quickly of just constantly clicking around in menus to build stuff. In this one, you're actually going to be involved in that process a little bit. Let's see. As a result, we've developed a dozen or so skill challenges which provide players an opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities within the specific skill set. As an example, see Figure 2. That's below. We'll take a look at it in a second. In the figure, you can see a simple blacksmithing skill challenge. Here, the player is required to cut out the shape of the axe blade they're trying to create. While it might not look like much, there's a couple of things happening that may not be obvious. First, the more complicated the object, the more complicated the shape the player must cut out. Second, The higher the absolute difficulty of the object, the less time the player has to cut it out. And third, the larger the difference between the character's skill and the skill of the item, the wider or narrower the margin of error. So what's the end result? The better you are as a player, the more likely you are to attain higher character skill levels. It should also be noted that several challenge types will be used across different crafting types. For example, blacksmithing, leatherworking, and tailoring all use the stencil challenge shown in Figure 2. In addition to the stencil challenge shown above, actually below, we've got a dozen other challenges planned which will be used with different shared skill sets. We're looking at a musical Guitar Hero style challenge for music skills. So if you want to be a bard, you're basically going to be playing Guitar Hero in an MMO. Which, I mean, that's kind of cool. Guitar Hero is a pretty fun game to play. People who are particularly musically inclined can probably get creative with the notes and make their own music, I imagine. I think they were talking at one point about allowing players to import their own MIDI files, and then you could run like a script to have your character play it, and so you could put together like an in-game band or something if you wanted to. I think that would be pretty cool. Really, the more opportunity there is for people to be creative in worlds like this, I think the better the world is as a result, because it's just so much more rich when you have all these people contributing to it rather than you're just kind of in this theme park looking around where you can't actually change anything. So, where were we again? For musical skills, find the item type challenges for tracking and other related skills, whack-a-mole type challenges for other smithy related skills, that might be kind of fun, and even operation style problems for first aid. So don't touch the sides if you're trying to save your friend. Want to remove that spearhead? Oh, they used my joke. I wouldn't have. Oh man. Want to remove the spearhead from your allies' wounds? Don't touch the sides. Yeah, I said it first. Okay, so here's the screenshot finally. You can see this is the axe head here, and you can actually see the player, or the character rather, hammering away at that axe head. And you've got the timer here, and so your job is to basically trace along this dashed line. Hopefully you guys can see my mouse. Yeah, trace along this dashed line, and you have a certain amount of time to do that. But the bigger the difference between the required skill for the item and your skill, the wider or narrower that gap will be. So, if you are really, really good at smithing and you're creating something fairly simple, you have a real wide area that you can just kind of quickly go through. But if you're a novice and you're trying to create, a real ornate weapon, you're going to have a real small area to kind of cut through there. And then obviously every time you go out, I imagine that's going to factor into the overall quality of the weapon. But this is kind of cool. It's involved. You get to actually watch your character do it, but also, you're involved in the process as well. And it's probably going to be fairly challenging. I don't know if maybe you could get around this by getting like I have a Wacom tablet for drawing. That might make things easier. I don't know. I imagine it probably would, but we'll see. I mean, they might do something to get around that, or maybe they don't care. Maybe if you want to get into smithing and stuff, you're welcome to do that. I might give it a try. I mean, I could draw pretty well, so I imagine tracing this would be easier with like a stylus on a tablet than it would be on with a mouse on a screen. But who knows? Anyways, item specialization and research. One thing we've done in an attempt to prevent endless grinding is to, in the case of crafting, provide item specialization. This means that you can become a master of crafting specific items even before becoming a master at your specific craft or trade. This has two fundamental implications. It means that if you want to become a master, weaponsmith, able to create sword blades that are unparalleled in the land, you can do that simply by crafting sword blades. You don't have to craft metal tools, axe blades, or metal stakes in order to get your blacksmithing skills high enough. Spend your time focusing on the things you want to make. That's kind of cool. So you can do what you want to do. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And your skills will not suffer from doing so. As we'll talk about more in later design journals, Chronicles of Elyria is a game of technology and research. At some point in the future, someone may, hypothetically speaking, discover the ability to make longbows, recurve bows, and eventually compound bows. In other MMOs, the discovery of a recurve bow would force all new players to grind through the knowledge of how to make short bows and long bows just to learn how to make a recurve bow. This results in wasted time and wasted resources. In Chronicles of Elyria, if you were to discover or learn how to make recurve bows, your success in doing so would, of course, be influenced by your overall crafting skills in ranged weapons and carpentry. However, there's nothing preventing you from jumping straight to recurve bows and growing your skills on those. So there's no formal tech tree that you need to follow. Once you know how to do something, you can do so without having to grind through the previous things, which is nice because, again, no wasted time here. You get right into what you want to do, and you learn how to do it. So, of course, your early results may be horrible, but you'll advance quicker at developing recurve bows if you actually practice making recurve bows than if you were to practice making short bows. So, you get good at what you do, and while making bows in general is going to increase your skills, broadly, focusing on what you want to make and just doing that is going to, grow your skills in that particular pathway much quicker. Crafting recipes. With other MMOs, as with many other MMOs, Chronicles of Elyria allows the transfer of knowledge, specifically in the crafting skills, through recipes. Having a recipe and being able to read the language grants you the knowledge necessary to attempt to craft something. There will be multiple languages in this game. I don't know that they've gone into considerable depth on how that'll work, but you could potentially find a recipe in a different language that you would need to have translated in order to be able to decipher, what's going on in there. Same goes for contracts and other things as well. If you also have sufficient skill, you'll be able to reproduce the item. Unlike other MMOs, there's a synergy between crafting and the scribing skills, as those who have sufficient bardic skill can create their own recipes to give to others in order to share the knowledge. So, obviously you're going to want to have a character who can do a couple different things, because being a smith, not only could you potentially sell the stuff you're creating, but if you're particularly good at a certain trade, or not trade, a certain item that you're crafting, some people may come along and want to buy the recipe for that particular item because you've designed a particularly good sword, and so having the skills necessary to do so could actually net you quite a bit of money, and so it might be worth learning those skills. Obviously, the bardic skills would also help you in your negotiations with your contracts and such. So definitely not something to neglect, but also, if you wanted to, you could get away with ignoring it. You would just have to kind of outsource that to somebody else. So, component-based crafting. Chronicles of Elyria utilizes, not uses, a component-based crafting model that both encourages collaboration and also allows producers to specialize in the types of objects they want to create. If you want to create a sword, you'll need a couple of different components. In specific, you'll need the blade and the hilt, the latter being made up of a handle, a crossguard, and a pommel. The handle again being made up of a wooden handle and some kind of binding. As you assemble the final product, you'll have the opportunity to swap out components for higher or lower quality components as desired, and sometime changing the type of component, such as changing from a straight blade to a curved blade, can even change the type of item you're creating and lead to the discovery of new recipes or patterns. So the items that you're crafting are going to be incredibly modular, which is great because that allows for quite a bit of customization. It also means that you can just make sword blades if you just want to make sword blades and focus on crafting the metal, and then you can have somebody else craft the wooden handles for you and purchase them from them. Or you can specialize in both and just be kind of like a one-stop shop for anybody looking for a sword. So a lot of options in this game, a lot of different ways to handle all the different things going on. I like more options rather than less options, so this is obviously a plus. And obviously with these come like different materials as well, so you could have like a bronze sword versus an iron sword versus a steel sword, or have like a softer wood handle versus like a harder wood handle, and stuff like that. And it also means that you could have a sword made up of several different kinds of metals. So you could have like a steel blade, but then have like a gold cross guard and pommel, and then like an ornate wooden handle or something. So you've got a lot of options for customizing weapons in this game. There's also filigree and designs and stuff that you can add as well, and different types of blades, as they sort of mentioned. There's going to be more than just straight and curved, though, I can tell you that much. So progressive construction. Chronicles of Elyria also uses the concept of progressive construction or value added. This means it's possible to take a simple item, either assembled or unassembled, and make it progressively better by adding onto it. For example, you can take any standard blade and add a blood groove to it to make it lighter. You can also take any existing blade and add filigree, etching, or even serration. So you can also decorate your blades if you so choose. That's probably going to require a little bit different skill though. And so resource management. In Chronicles of Elyria, virtually everything you encounter in the world is craftable, and virtually everything can be used as a resource for crafting. To begin with, we divide resources into inorganic and organic materials. The inorganic materials consist of metals, stone, gems and minerals, sand, chalk, and clay. The organic materials can be divided up into various plants and animal products. When harvesting plants, you can generally gather the fruit, leaves, petals, buds, stalks, reeds, bark, roots, wood, saps, and oils. So obviously, just from a tree alone, there's quite a few things that you can gather that would be useful for different trades. Obviously, for things like petals and buds and leaves, you're probably looking at more like alchemy. For bark and wood, you're probably looking at carpentry. And then saps and oils, I imagine the saps would be used as like adhesives. The oils might be good for people who are metalworking, or maybe they'd be useful in alchemy as well. I don't know. Anywho, when harvesting animal parts, you can often get the skin or hide, meat, bone, and organs. So I wonder if you could make like a I don't know what animals they're going to have in this game. I think they're going to use like low fantasy animals, so they'll be very real animal-like, but not entirely familiar. So I don't know, maybe like a saber-toothed tiger fang sword or something. But yeah, so basically everything on the plants and animals that you find is going to be harvestable and able to be used in some sort of crafting type. So in all the above cases, the raw materials are processed by a gathering skill to turn them into something consumable by different crafting professions. For example, those with the mining skill are able to gather raw metals and then convert them into smelted ingots. Those with the mining skill can also use the jewel cutting skill to take gems from metal deposits and cut them into jewels for use by jewelers. Alright, deconstruction. This is going to be very important as well. In Chronicles of Elyria, the majority of crafted objects which require assembly can also be disassembled. There's a couple of reasons you might want to do this. First, if you decide later you want a better hilt on your sword, you can take it apart, put a better hilt on it, and you're good to go. This applies to the component level as well. Don't like the ruby on the pommel of your sword? Take it off and put a shiny new sapphire on. Second, many items in Chronicles of Elyria suffer durability loss over time. While it's possible to take the blade you've been using to a grinding wheel and put a good edge back on it, that'll only work so many times. At some point, it'll be necessary to get rid of the blade entirely and put a new one on it. But that does mean that you can keep the overall sword You just need to swap out a new blade, which is better than having to ditch your like legendary golden hilted sword with like a ruby, embedded in it for some cheap iron sword just because the blade finally wore out. Okay, recycling. One of the major problems in most MMOs is the need for a money sink. This sink is necessary because resources are unlimited. Metal deposits are constantly appearing as new resource nodes. Sorry, I feel like I missed a word there. Metal deposits are constantly appearing as new resource nodes. Oh, okay, I just missed the comma. Animals are always respawning, and NPC villains forever roam the land with wealth that materialized out of thin air. Most MMOs handle this problem, among other ways, by having resources destroyed during crafting. This is true whether you're successful or unsuccessful. If you fail a skill check, you may lose some percent of the resources in addition to failing to create the item. If you succeed, you may get the item, but the resources are still gone forever. However, Chronicles of Elyria is a world with finite resources. Metals, gems, and other non-renewable resources can become extremely valuable as the game evolves. As a result, we've instituted a mechanic for recycling. Oh, excuse me. It's very late. Many materials, such as metals, can be disassembled from their current object, such as taking a blade off a sword, and can be remelted into ingots at a forge. In this way, many materials can be put to new use. Rather than forcing you to sell the blade you just found to an NPC as vendor trash, you can instead take the bad blade, put it back in the forge, and recoup most of the metal used in the initial crafting. In this way, you can continue to craft an item, advancing your skill until you create a product at the quality you're looking for. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay. So I quite like that idea because, I don't know, think of the example like, so you're a blacksmith and you've constantly got people with, busted up swords coming in looking for new swords. You could tell them, well, hey, I always need resources to make new swords. So if you give me your old sword to, melt down into parts, I will give you a discount on the new sword. And so you're not wasting anything. The old sword is becoming materials for a new sword. Or, maybe it's not that bad and you can just kind of sharpen it and throw it back out there and somebody will buy it. But you've got constant turnover, you're not wasting resources, and I don't know how finite is in this game, so I don't know if that means there's eventually toward like the end of the 10-year goal that they've got planned. I don't know if that means that like you're going to start seeing them like running out of coal to burn or whatever happens, but I do like the idea of finite resources. All of the gold coins that you find in this game are going to have to be minted by somebody and dug out of the ground. You're not just going to have like gold appearing in NPCs' pockets because they're NPCs. Everybody who has gold in this game is going to have earned that gold somehow, whether they worked for it, whether they minted it themselves, whether they stole it. The gold came from somewhere, and so money actually has some kind of real value in this game. It's not just something that magically appears when you kill an enemy. Anyways, what's next? You guys can see this, right? Yeah, you can. Okay. This week's design journals focused on skills, skill advancement, crafting, and professions. Next week, we're going to take a deep dive into a specific set of survival skills to learn more about maps, cartography, and navigation. Something else that I find really interesting, although I don't know that I would be particularly interested in specializing in this, maybe as like one of my alt characters, but it does seem really cool the way that they're going to allow you to do this. Obviously, we'll get more into it next time. For now, I think we're pretty much out of time, and I've said more or less everything I wanted to say about this topic. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and break this off right here. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to get involved in the Chronicles of Elyria community, you can follow the link below. And it would be very kind of you to use my friend code down there as well. And anywho, thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys back here for Design Journal number 10.